All right, it's time again for some AI mistakes. Welcome in. Thanks for joining me tonight. We're going to talk about filling up with AI video generation. What exactly do I mean by that? Well, we'll get into it. I'm Daniel Lemire. Thanks for dropping by. AI mistakes. Listen, I want to show you some really cool things today. And I think it's really been a fabulous week in AI, if I'm honest. There's been a lot of things that are happening. And with all of the things that are going on, you just have to pick something and get after it, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about here at AI Mistakes is getting your hands on the wheel and making things happen. And that's what I want to take you through my journey. You see, I've been working on making a scene, as it were, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the Coliseum. So let's get into it. Listen, I want to start with this. There are some really incredible sites around the world that you can see, and the Colosseum is one of them. Perhaps someday I'll get there myself to see it. But until then, all we can do is imagine the scene that we want to visit and take advantage of images like this to see it from afar. Well, when we talk about being able to imagine something, we can go much further than simply imagining the location as it is. And with the advent of AI, we can go so much further. So, using the power of AI video generators, we're going to fill up the Colosseum. And what do I mean by fill up the Colosseum? Because there's a lot to unpack there. So I want to cover the Colosseum in detail a little bit before we get into the AI piece of this. So let's just dive into the Colosseum. Now, when you visit the Colosseum, I understand that it is an incredible place to visit. It's very big. But let's go back. Let's go back into the era of ancient Rome, around 80. And they're running this inaugural game in this incredible amphitheater. Imagine the water rushing in through the canals. That's the kind of scenario that we're talking about. Many of us have seen or experienced stories of the gladiators. And when we talk about seeing the gladiators, we also have to remember the incredible accomplishments that happened in that day, right? The aqueducts were an incredible achievement for the Roman Empire and really made the difference. So, what I want to think about now is if you combined that with the idea of gladiators fighting in that amphitheater with this idea of a water filled arena, now we can imagine what it might have been like to have a naval battle. And actually, in ancient Rome, they had a very specific name for it. And it may not be something that you're even aware of. They actually did have some sort of a naval battle. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. It was the Naumanchi. And it was basically the very first battle they had as the inaugural event. They staged a naval battle, and it was held in this specially constructed arena that was filled with water. And they actually have evidence that they filled the Colosseum with water, of all things. So during this time, they brought in a ton of materials. They brought in ships, they brought in men, and they had an incredible spectacle. And they did this not once, but several times. It was a pretty interesting thing to see. And doing a little bit of research on this, there's some contention about exactly how often it happened. But the reality is, we know that there was some amount of exhibition that went on that included water, and it took over the Colosseum. And they did eventually have to stop doing it, but just imagine what it might have looked like, because that's what we have to work with. We do have a few images. So let's start with this. Our very first image here is what the Colosseum looks like today. And you can see that they got some scaffolding there. They're trying to make it look better. They're trying to give you an idea of what it looked like. If you look in that part there in the center of the photograph, they're showing you what the ground floor of the arena would have looked like. And everything below that looks like a sort of a bridge, or perhaps a crossing there. Everything underneath of that was about controlling the release of animals or people into that arena. And so you might imagine that that was the level that the entire stadium was looking at for whatever happened to be going on. So if I take you back in time to look at an ancient rendering of this, think about, as I'm showing this, the floor being filled with water, and there being sets constructed on top of that to really fill the scene. And it might have included islands or even some amount of city development in what they were staging in the Colosseum. This is one rendering of what it might have looked like. And you can see that in this case, they have the entire Colosseum is filled to the brim with the people, and they've got some men that are in the ships, and the ships are moving around in the arena. Now, all we have to work on is some basic information in history and a little bit of archaeology. And I think what's interesting about this is that we just don't know enough to satisfy our curiosity. But ultimately, where we are today is that we no longer have to rely on simple line drawings. We can also use our imagination. We can think about what the ships would have looked like, what the men would have looked like fighting on those ships. And if we go a little bit further and think more deeply, getting some understanding of what the experts say is that they were highly choreographed events. Everything was planned. There was a lot of things that were happening. And of course, if you know anything about what happened from the gladiatorial days, there were a lot of participants in this that did not choose to be there. They were simply a part of this. And in fact, the story that's told is actually expanded upon. If you're familiar with any of the Hollywood movies, you may be aware that Gladiator 2 was recently released. Now, I didn't get to see the movie. It's not been on my list, but as I understand it, actually, they included some details that were regarding this having the naval battle. This website, The Conversation, talks about details of the featured naval battle that were in that film. So there was a lot of work to be done. And I think that this is particularly relevant to our discussion today, because what we're talking about actually is really replicating this experience. Now, look, I don't have a Hollywood budget, okay? I'm not a Hollywood filmmaker. This is not my core discipline. But AI is something that I like to use to do really amazing things. You should also know that I'm not as talented as Ridley Scott in terms of making films, but we do have the ability to make a video with AI. Now, before I jump in and show you all about OpenAI Sora that became available to me, I just want you to know about a couple of the other solutions that are out there. So if this is an area that you're very interested in really diving in and doing more, there's a lot of opportunity, and Sora is not the only one. So quickly, just before we dive deeply into Sora, what are they? Well, the most commonly talked about ones that I have seen recently are tools like Runway Gen 3. And the reason why Runway Gen 3 is talked about so often is really they were the first mover in the space. And when I say Gen 3, that means they're on generation 3 of their models. So they have reached a very high level of maturity for enabling this capability at scale. Now, their plans are not the least expensive, but they are the most powerful. They have a very well-developed set of features that lets you do text to video, image to video, and even video to video. So if you can imagine it and build a scene, there's some really powerful things that you can do. And then they give you controls well beyond just being able to make the scene. They also give you control over the camera, which is really powerful. Now, another competitor that's out there is Kling, and I believe this organization is out of China. They have really been working hard to improve their quality. And from those folks that are out there playing with these tools each and every day, they've had some very good outputs that I have seen that are really quite impressive. Their model is very mature, and they do have some more advanced tools for putting this together. When you want to make a scene, they give you a lot of control over color and motion and lighting, and there's some really good feature set around both text and image-based video creation. So you can actually bring it to life simply by typing in text, or you can also use images. Luma is another one. And again, they also have text to video and image to video generation. Now, I didn't go really deep into all of the feature set of Sora with the limited time that I've had this week to play with it. But, look, pricing is a thing that matters. I have the benefit of already having the ChatGPT subscription, so I got immediate access to Sora. And because this isn't sort of my key discipline, it's not likely that I'm going to go and further evaluate these other tools. That's a critical thing for you to know. But I want to give you a taste of what's possible. And then, of course, I also want to let you know that Google Veo dropped this week, and it uses still photos and text prompts, but it's not available for us to play yet. I am kind of excited about what I've seen in the announcement. They're making this available through Google Vertex. They're rolling it to their existing AI customers first. So perhaps I'll get a chance to play with that because I also have the Google subscription, and I'll be able to get access to this based on what I already have. So let's talk a little bit about what Sora is and where we are today. The question I'm asking here is Sora the ChatGPT of video generation? Because look, you cannot deny where we are today with OpenAI, right? They are the 800-pound gorilla in the space. They are the one that everyone's sort of going after and trying to beat. And we've been playing this cat and mouse game of who has the best capabilities, who do you need to work with. I think when you look at the widely available models, certainly they are up there. And then you can't argue with the fact that most people know what ChatGPT is, far more know about ChatGPT than they do about Anthropic or even Google's ability to do that generation. So we have to talk about what OpenAI is offering. And as they've made that available, one of the things that they've been working on over the last several days is this 12 days of OpenAI. And they announced Sora in this very early on. Now, what Sora has been talked about, they've been feeding us these images over time and teasing us. Earlier this year, they showed us the images and said that they were working on this and it was going to be available. They've chosen very specific people to give early access to this. They have been working with Hollywood a great deal. So there are definitely some pinnacle use cases, and we are going to see this technology implemented to a significant degree in Hollywood. And it's more than just the existing directors that are using these kinds of videos. And as you can see here, what's cool is that as these videos are being made now, not just by the critical people at OpenAI, but people like me, they're letting these details out. But before we get into talking all about what's available, I want you to see kind of some inspiration around where we are and what my thought process was in building this experience. Because I had an opportunity to know that Sora was coming out a few days ahead of time. And so I sat down and I started thinking about, okay, I don't have Sora yet. What am I going to do? Right. And I think ultimately it comes down to AI storytelling. Basically, we're talking about taking a story and trying to render it in video for others to see and enjoy. And I've had the opportunity of working with a lot of really sharp people in AI, and I've taken some courses, I've done some groundwork, and I had an opportunity earlier this year to meet and have more than one conversation with some folks that are working on these kinds of capabilities. And I met this guy, Eric Archer, through one of the courses I took, and he's been working on this space, being able to do amazing things with AI in his immediate field. And as a part of doing that work, he got connected with the AI Exchange and was really pushing himself to do as much as he possibly could. And what he did is he actually made a film with AI using image generation and adding a bit of motion. You've probably seen some of those older history shows where they take the old photograph and they give it some motion to help you really feel like you're more in the situation without having to go through all of the Hollywood complexity to build that out. So I just want to share this briefly with you. He's got some really great insights. You'll see some tricks here that he did with minimal amounts of motion. And this was done in January before anything like Sora was available.
In 1854, Salem, Massachusetts teetered on the brink of a new era. Its once bustling harbors quieted by the echoes of war and the whispers of its witch trial past. Rufus Archer, a skilled tradesman, grew up in a family deeply connected to the city's history. Trained as a cooper, a highly respected and essential trade, Rufus crafted barrels and casks, vital for shipping and storage of goods. His work supported Salem's thriving shipping and trade industry, connecting him with diverse cultures and goods from around the world.
As we stand upon the cusp of a new age, I confess a trepidation that gnaws at the very sinew of my being. The ironclad promise of advancement and prosperity casts a long shadow over those of us who ply ancient trades with hand and heart. There lies an
So I thought Eric did a really great job of putting this together, a really great demonstration of storytelling. And that really inspired me to think about it. He brought together all of these tools. He's got ChatGPT and Midjourney and 11 Labs. He really brought together the pinnacle capabilities that were available to him in each of the different domains. Being able to do the voiceover, being able to do the image generation, and using ChatGPT to help build that story. And as the capability has evolved, we have to understand that where we are today is that our imagination, our vision for these things can go well beyond what the technology is capable of. But not everybody's good at having that vision. If you're not used to making film or video or putting these kinds of things together, you might need some help. And this is where one of the projects that Eric has been working on, he just made this available in the last couple of weeks, is this tool called SmartyPants, which basically is a collection of GPTs that let you sort of really think deeply about the things that need to be done through the power of his GPTs. Basically, you're able to choose that domain area that you want to work on, jump into the GPT, and it will ask you questions and prompt you to do very specific things. Well, one of those specific things that I had the opportunity to work with is one of the modules that Eric built into SmartyPants is a module that actually lets you dive in and understand how to build a video concept. So I have been using ChatGPT under normal circumstances, just leveraging this GPT to kind of think about what it is that I want to build. And that's where things got started. So I did this video concept planning. And one of the things that came out of this was, thinking about what I wanted to do. And I didn't start with the video concept planner. Actually, what I started with is, what do I want to present, right? What is the idea that I want to follow? And so I just pulled up Perplexity and I thought, man, wouldn't it be cool to do the Colosseum and these battles that took place, these naval battles? So I just basically went into Perplexity and I asked it to describe in detail exactly what it was that was happening, and giving it this detailed prompt, right? Describe in detail what it might have looked like in narrative form for the Colosseum filled with water, having the ship battle on display for all to see. And by giving this prompt, of course, Perplexity gave me some great information back. It went and found some images from the sources. There's a variety of websites, and it brings it all to you, which is really powerful because it's not just the textual search, it's helping to fill out that idea. But then it took all of the information that it found and it brought it together. And it actually wrote a nice little narrative, right? It gives a direct answer, right? And you saw this in the very beginning of the presentation that I gave to you tonight. This is what Perplexity helped me do. And so I got a much better feel for how I might get into the story. And then when I had the opportunity, I started working directly with Sora. So what does it look like to work directly with Sora? Let's talk about it. Let's flood the Coliseum and see what this actually looks like. So if we jump over to Sora here, you see the video generations I've done. Let's go all the way back to the very first generation that I put together. And what you see here is really just a raw output of what I put together. And what I did was a conglomeration of that narrative story, the details that I got out of Perplexity, and I plugged that in. And when I generated this, what was interesting is that I was able to give it a series of prompts. And the very first prompt that I put in was that general description. And then when I hit submit, it built the timeline, this storyboard of what's going to happen. And it filled out some of the information in the boxes. Now, with this interface, what we have here is, let me get myself off the screen here. We've got a timeline down here that shows you where each of those storyboard frames can fit. And you have, in this case, I selected a 10-second 480p clip to make, and you can do a higher resolution, but that consumes more credits. So what I built was basically 100 credits each time, and I've just about used up my credits until into next year. I've used half of my credits so far to generate a couple of videos. But when you fill in your textual detail here, what's interesting is that after you're done filling in the information you want to fill out, you can actually have it expand the caption. And what's cool here is that it's going to take the text that you have filled in there and it's going to add some more detail to it. So Sora's done a good job already of helping us to understand and fill out the detail, because just a single sentence is really not enough detail for it to do a great job of rendering the text. And so all you have to do is actually go in here and expand the text out. Now, I didn't understand when I did this the very first time how essential it was to expand out the text, because I'd not done this before. I knew having a vision for the story was important, but I didn't understand the implications that went against actually rendering that story. And that's why you get some of the poor results in these couple of videos. Now, I did the two at a time, and as you can see here, it did understand the Coliseum. It did put some islands in there, and I did put that in the initial prompt. So, you know, given that initial prompt that I put out there, I really think that Sora did a good job. So it was very helpful in really understanding what it was that I wanted to do and recombining that text to turn it into a storyboard so that it could be a nice rendered video. And aside from the fact that I used the word drone to try to tell it what kind of shot I wanted, what we actually got was a drone in the video. So that was very clearly not the answer that I was going for. But then I got to try the generation again. And if we look at this version, I think this is a much improved rendering. The crowd is a little more detailed. We've got more motion in the way the boats are moving around, but we do have the problem near the end where it's sort of cutting across the island, and then it looks like there's maybe like a boat in the island in the middle. So I wasn't terribly excited about the composition of that one, but this right side kind of shows this fleet of ships, and you could see where maybe it's able to tell the story, and you could see maybe where those ships come together at some point during the battle. So that's the one that I picked, and I kind of shared some of these details out on social media earlier this week. And I had so much fun putting this together. I thought, well, I wonder what would happen if I kept going with this. So that's when I really went back to ChatGPT and I said, all right, I've got Eric's tool here that can help me with the video concept planning. So let me plug in some of the details. So all I did was just start up the GPT to help me through this. Because again, this is a process that I'm totally new to. I've not ever done this before. I've really not given any deep thought to, telling a story in terms of making a video. So it tells me what it is that I can do. And then I'm just explaining to, look, I want to build a video. I want to talk about the Coliseum. This is the age that I want to work in. And it takes that and it builds out the video concept. So it's taking my request, which is to create a series of clips, and it's providing some details, key visuals. What is it that you want to be in the shot? Is it a wide shot? Is it a narrow shot? What is the important part of what's on display? So it's calling out, we're going to have crowds of Romans, and then it's going to do a dramatic zoom in. And then there's going to be some subtle details. So it really helped me get a better understanding of, what were the elements that are important here. And what I found interesting was, as I was actually going through this, I had some discoveries in the prompting. What I observed was that there is definitely some similarities in terms of what Eric put into the GPT and what we're seeing with Sora, because a lot of these details actually showed up in the storyboarding as I was working on this. And that was actually pretty cool to realize the level of effort that OpenAI put into helping guide the conversation so that you could have a good output in what you're creating. And you see here that this time around, I was able to do a much better job really out of the gate in filling out the prompts. And I don't want to bore you with all of the details, but understanding how essential that is really led to a muchly improved output from the model. And this is certainly not perfect. There's a lot of iteration that I think and fine tuning that would need to happen in order for this to be a real film quality piece. But for a first run output, I would say the things I really like about this is there's some good external shots of the Coliseum. We've got motion and people moving around. Clearly, some of them are in Roman garb, but not all of them. That was one of the mistakes that I made. Was I told it that I wanted to see Romans and that I wanted to see people moving around, but I didn't give it enough detail to ensure that the generation of the people didn't include modern day clothing. You see about half of the people in the shot are not in the appropriate dress. And so, these details I'm picking up on more now, having gone back and noticed all of the detail, because this is not the kind of detail that I'm best at, right? Like I spent most of my life writing code. It's the, the instantiation of the variables and the functions and how they interact. Like that's my area of expertise. Being able to observe and key in on all these details as someone watching a video is something I'm less good at. But, the more you look at it, the more you're going to pick up on things. So the next generation then was creating some crowd excitement. And once again, I got the description of the crowd in there. I told that I wanted a lot of people. I wanted an announcer walking around, and it did it, but it did it in everyday modern clothing. In fact, the only person wearing sort of the traditional Roman clothing here is the announcer, which of course I told it I wanted them to be in this flowing robe as a part of the spectacle. So it did exactly what I told it. And that's the thing about AI, right? It's going to do what you tell it to do. And even in the case of prompting, right? I'm giving it a prompt that I want. OpenAI is taking that prompt and changing it, modifying it to improve my results. I mean, they're using prompts to improve my prompts. And so we're going to get better at this as it goes. But we also have to recognize that there is a learning curve, even if it makes it more accessible to those of us that aren't familiar with using it. There is absolutely a lot of learning that has to take place. And that's why you have to get started. When you get started working with these tools, you'll start to identify those areas that need attention. So this was attempt number 2 for the crowd. And I went in and I gave it a lot more detail of what kind of clothing the people should be wearing. You see here at the very beginning, it is improved. Now, to be clear, it's not perfect, and there's definitely some issues in here. And I think at some point down the road, we'll have things like in painting. You know, you'll be able to carve out specific places where it wasn't what you wanted, and you'll be able to edit it a lot more powerfully. I also think, having seen some of the output from the likes of Runway, that their output is probably going to be a little bit more consistent because there's a lot more control over how you're doing the shot. But I really think that I've learned a lot just with a few minutes spent with this tool, trying to get it to generate the video. And it's been a lot of fun to understand what that looks like. So now is the part that I want to ask you. Like, what is it that you see here that you find that's most interesting? And we've got a few people that are on the live. Jason, thanks for joining us. Appreciate you popping in. Do I have a link to the GPT? Yes, absolutely. I will put a link in the comments to the video, and also want to encourage you to pull up Eric's website. Let me just pop over to that again real quick. He's got it. I've got it linked here. I'll just pull it up in the browser so you can see it. It's cgcreative.com, and he's got a link to the site, and you can actually go in there and get access to his SmartyPants AI ecosystem, which does way more than what I've shown you here today. A really cool set of tools. And you know, this is all kind of gated, so you have to go and pick up Eric's SmartyPants. He's got a page where you can go and order that off of Gumroad. And I really think that this is the kind of thing that helps people see not just what's possible from a vision standpoint, but also all of the different ways and use cases that you can uniquely apply this to your needs. And there's, I think, a huge opportunity from an AI tool development perspective for building out these very specific use cases. And I think that's really one of the big challenges with a tool like ChatGPT. When you look at the way that we can do anything with these tools, well, one of the big challenges is you can do anything. So what do you do, right? So having these kind of pointed conversations about, look, do you want to tell a story with video? Do you want to write a book? Do you want to create a newsletter? There's all sorts of things that you can go after. There's tons and tons of opportunities, but you and I have to decide what it is that we want to do. And then when you decide what it is that you want to do, then you have to really dig into it and start asking questions like, how can I build this vision more deeply? How can I have a conversation with the AI so that I can learn about the elements of this that are essential, and then really get into it to such a degree that I have a clarity of vision about what I want to build. And this is really my mission with AI mistakes. When I talk about this concept of AI mistakes, it's really getting your hands dirty, but also using my mistakes framework to help you think through how to build out that thing, right? And step one is, what's going on around you. What are the base options? When we talk about all of the image generation capabilities and the video generation capabilities, you don't have to choose them all, but, do a little bit of research, see what's out there, right? So that when you get started, when you hit a wall or you're having difficulty in using one, hey, maybe there's another tool out there that you could try that works better for your workflow. I've seen this time and again in the software space where, people approach the problem a little bit differently. And by being able to get in and get started, you get familiar enough with what it is that you want to do so that you can understand the maturity that's involved in doing that well, but also finding a tool that fits your needs. So that really covers the material I wanted to talk through tonight. And now here comes the challenge, right? If this is something you're really into, get out there, go make some mistakes, and then share what you learn back with the community. We have so many opportunities to take the wheel, get after it, learn something, and then help someone else accomplish their dreams by using this technology. So go make some mistakes, and we'll see you next time.